All right, folks, I got a 1999 International 4700 T444E. That's the 7.3 diesel. This is the same diesel as you'll find in many Fords. It's a 7.3 power stroke. Anyway, we had the water pump go out, so we're going to replace the water pump on this. So let me show you what we've done so far. So we had one hose here which goes up. I've tucked it out of the way, but that is your overflow reservoir hose. We had another metal deal here with the thermostat goes in there, and then you got a metal deal and a hose hooks there. That's this hose here, which is your top end to your radiator. We took that off. So we disconnected the hoses on this side. We removed the serpentine bolt. We removed the coolant filter. This was just a drain plug. And that's what we've done on this side. Let's go around the other side. I'll show you what we've done over there. Okay, on this side, so we disconnected this hose just to get it out of our way. This is another hose that goes to the bottom of the coolant overflow reservoir. Of course, I already said we removed the serpentine belt. There's the tensioner. We took a 1/2-inch wrench and put it on there, loosened it up, and just pulled the belt right off. Very simple. And we also removed down on the bottom there, you can't really see it, but we removed the other radiator hose on the bottom. That's the bottom end radiator hose, so that's disconnected. So what we need to do now is we need to get the fan clutch nut to break free. That's the probably the hardest part of this job. This is a 1999. This is all original, so you can imagine that thing is stuck on there pretty good. So how are we going to do that? Obviously, if we turn the fan, it turns freely with the pulley. So the first thing you have to do is get a way to hold that thing so that you can break that nut free. So we built a tool for that. There are 4 bolts on the front of that pulley. We removed 2 of the bolts. We took a piece of flat iron. This is 1/8 inch thick, 1.5 inch wide, 4 feet long. And here's what we did. We drilled 2 holes at 2-inch spacing because we measured the bolts on the pulleys. They're 2 inches apart, and so 2 holes at 2-inch spacing, 3/8 holes. They are big enough, a little bigger than we need, but we wanted a little wiggle room. And then we cut out this space here to give space for the shaft to the fan clutch. Here's the bolts that we removed. It's a 10mm M8 bolt, but it's short, very short. So if we put this through there, we do not have a lot of bolt left because it still has to go through the pulley and then into the shaft mount. And my concern is that by the time we take off probably another 1/8 inch for that pulley, we wouldn't have enough threads left to safely do what we want to do. And I definitely don't want to strip this bolt out or ruin it. So I went to Tractor Supply, and probably could have got the same thing at Lowe's or any of the box stores, whatever. I bought a package of M8 by 125, that's your coarse thread M8 metric screw, just standard hex nuts, stainless, by I guess 20mm long. So you can see they're about 1/4 of an inch longer than the original bolt. So my intent is I removed 2 of these bolts from the pulley. The way that I held the pulley is I took 2 10mm wrenches, I put 1 wrench on another bolt to hold the pulley steady, and then I broke this bolt free using the other wrench. So that was how I was able to hold it steady to do that. If you do that before you remove the serpentine belt, you might be better off, but we're kind of learning as we go. So anyway, these bolts are longer, hopefully this is going to work. So our intent is to basically the two places that we removed the bolts, we're going to put these line these holes up and bolt this thing onto the pulley. And because it's 4 feet long, that's going to give us plenty of handle to hold this thing steady. And we're going to bring it out this side. We've got this bar here that supports the radiator, and so if we line this thing right on top of that bar, when we crank that thing, this will actually hold that tool steady. So that's our plan. Stick with us, let's see how it goes. Alright, so we ran into a challenge. So you can see this is the original bolt. It's got a tiny 10mm hex head with a cap or whatever they call it. And then we've got a standard hex nut. These are the ones we bought. So the problem is that it's too long and the hex head is crashing with the fan clutch nut, and so we can't get it in. When we get it in the hole, the hex is colliding and we can't turn it to screw it in. So we tried to make it shorter. So what we did, we took a M8 by 125 die, we screwed the nut into it, and then we cut off about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, looks like. Here's the original. So you can see it's just a little bit shorter. We're trying to make it so that it is about 1/8 of an inch longer than the original to compensate for the tool that we're going to screw on there. So that's right about where we're at. And so now we're going to try to screw that in. Anyway, we screwed it into the die. We cut off the end, cleaned it up a little bit, and then screwed the die off so the threads are basically the same as they originally were. So it should start into the hole. So let's give it a try and see what happens. Okay, so success. That worked. We were able to get that first bolt in there to hold that tool in place. So now we've got to cut another one for the other side so we can get 2 bolts in to hold that thing how we want it. Okay, so first step, we screwed this nut all the way into our die. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the die from the holder with the nut still in it. Help if I didn't drop it. Okay, so now what we've got is we've got our die with the nut going through it. Now I'm just going to take the cutoff wheel and I'm just going to remove probably about 1/8 of an inch or so from this nut, and then I'll just kind of go around the outside, smooth it off, and then when we unscrew it from the die, that will repair any threads that we mess up, and we'll be good to go to screw it into the pulley there. Okay, so there it is. I cut about 1/8 of an inch off, and then I went around the edge to kind of bevel it a little bit so that can get it started. And that should, now when we unscrew it, I can see where the threads are messed up a little bit right on the end where the grinder hit it, but when we unscrew it from the die, that'll fix that problem. So I put the die back into the holder, tighten it up, and then unscrew it. So what did I say this was, like a 20mm in length? So I don't know what size this is now. So if you can find something shorter in between the 20 and whatever the size of the original one is, just take the original one with you to the store and find something that's in between. If you can't find something in between, if you have a die, or you can buy an M8 by 125 die and basically shorten it yourself like I did. And I'm just running it through the die a couple of times just to make sure it's good and cleaned up. Don't want messed up threads messing this thing up at all. So easy enough to run it through your die a few times back and forth. Just make sure those threads are good and clean. You should be able to screw it by hand if they're good and clean, and we can now. So all right, now we're going to get this one on. Okay, the other lesson learned here is this flat bar is 4 foot long. I didn't really measure and know how long a piece I needed, so I just bought a 4 foot piece from the, you know, bar stock, whatever, at Tractor Supply. You can get it at any box store as well. And looking at it now, it overhangs quite a bit, so I did not need 4 feet. Probably 2 feet would have done it. So you could save a little money there and get a 2 or 3 foot piece, and it would do the job just as well. Pretty sure 2 foot would work. I'll get a tape measure and measure that later and make sure, but plenty of overhang there anyway. Let's see. Okay. Chisel on there. Let's see what happens. Well, so far it ain't budging. Man. Well, I'd like to say that this just made it easy, but fortunately it's not budging. Oh man. Oh, not good. All right, folks, so let's talk about what we've done so far. So again, the goal is to remove this water pump without removing the radiator and all that stuff. So let's see. We pulled the pulley that was here. That took a T50 Torx. So we had to go to Harbor Freight and buy some big Torx bits. We bought an impact set and removed it with a 1/2-inch drive. It actually came off pretty easy. So remove that pulley, and then we remove the pulley in the middle. The reason we remove the pulley in the middle, same reason, getting access to all the different bolts that bolt this thing on to the engine block. So the challenge in getting that pulley off was, again, holding the pulley steady. So I used a strap wrench to do that. My advice, if you build a tool like I did and you mount the bar using 2 bolts to the pulley, so I would say remove 2 bolts before you ever take the serpentine belt off. So hopefully the serpentine belt will hold it tight enough in order to do that. If not, you'll have to put another 10mm wrench on one of the other bolts to hold the pulley steady while you break free one of the bolts. So once I broke them free, they unscrewed by hand. It was easy. Just breaking them free was the challenge. Okay, so if you break 2 free like that, or if you can break them all free like that and just leave them hand tight and then bolt your tool on. You could break 2 free, bolt your tool on to hold the pulley after you remove the serpentine belt or before, and then break the other ones free before you remove that tool. That way you have an easy way to hold the pulley and you won't have to use a strap wrench to do that, because you are going to have to pull that pulley in order to get to all the bolts. After that, all the bolts were 10mm. If I didn't mention before, the fan clutch is normal threads. I know some fan clutches are left-hand threads, but not on the Internationals or the Fords. They are, you know, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So in other words, to take it off, it's counterclockwise. So, let's see. Now we've removed all the bolts from the water pump. There are 9 bolts. If you don't know where your bolts are, use your new water pump as your reference to see where they are, and then just kind of go through. I was able to take a 10mm socket with a short extension and a 3/8 drive ratchet to take those off. So we removed all the bolts. Now the next thing we'll do is we should be able to break the water pump free from the block. So we'll see if we can get a pry bar in there or what we're going to have to do to break the seal. It's already broke somewhat because it's draining, started draining more fluid out of the engine block. So that shows that the seal is partially broken. Oh yeah, there you go. So easy to take off. Now that I've broke it free, I will just lift it out and pull it out this way. It's going to take 2 hands to do that, so I can't hold the camera while I do that. But I'll remove the water pump this way. After that, then I'll start, I got to pull all these different pieces off. Little hose attachments on this side, and there's heater hose ones on the other side that have to be removed from this one and put onto the new one. It comes with it came with a new seal. I'll probably clean the front of that engine block up, scrape it, get it good and clean, and then maybe put a bead of silicone on that just to make sure we get a real good seal on that new water pump. And then we'll start putting those 10mm bolts back in to tighten her all up. And once the new one's mounted, then we'll just start putting her back together in the reverse order that we took it apart. So I'm pretty confident at this point that this is going to work and that we are going to get it out of there and be able to get the new one in. We did not pull the fan out, as you can see. I just pushed it up flush with the radiator there, and I have moved it around a couple times, like to get the pulley out and things like that. I had to shift it around a little bit to work it out, but otherwise I've left it in there. Things I could have done a little bit different. I probably could pull this shroud off, and that would have made some space. But in order to pull the shroud off, I mean, it's got bolts all the way around it. This hose right here is the hose at the top there is bolted to it. That's connected to the bottom of the overflow container. I would have to pull some of my turbo intercooler air hoses, whatever they are, and do that as well. And at this point, I haven't needed to remove it, so I've left it. I'm trying to minimize the work. Now, you do have to be a little bit of a contortionist to get in and out of here. So my wheel, not a lot of space, but I am able to squeeze right in there and stand in this space. But you can see my wheel here is turned to the right If I had it to do over again, I would straighten the wheel out so that I had more room in there. I've done most of the work from this side, so having a little more space in there would have been better, but we're making do. So that's pretty much what I can think of thus far. That's my advice based on, you know, what I've learned from doing this. I have not ever done this before. I've done water pumps on my regular pickups over the years, and you know, I was always able to basically do the same thing, not have to pull the whole front end off and just find the space and make it work. So that's what we're doing this one, and so far it's working. As you can see, it all looks really good. So we caught this early. The water pump really appears to be in pretty good shape. I mean, there's just a slight bit of wobble in there. So it was just beginning to go. So I'd say 99.9% of the time, this is where you lose your water pump. This shaft that comes through the water pump connects to the fan pulley on the front. The bearings in there and the seal goes out, and so it starts leaking coolant out that shaft. That is basically the only moving part on one of these things. Now, I did see another video where somebody had one that, I mean, the bearings were so far gone on there that this pump blade, whatever you want to call it, serpentine impeller, it's an impeller, that actually the bearings were so loose and everything that on the front of the engine block it had wore that space there a little bit, and you can see this is perfectly smooth, no wear at all. So we caught it early. The only other challenge I had getting this thing out, so on this end there are two heater hoses connected. I believe they're both heater hoses. Anyway, this one here, you can see it's still got a lot of hose on it. I mean, it was literally fused. I could not get it off for the life of me, so I ended up just cutting it. And I'll replace that 3/4 inch heater hose. This one came off okay. So let's take a look at that and make sure those are heater hoses. Okay, so one of them is a heater hose. The heater core is back here, goes to there, runs along through here and down and into one of those. That's the piece I had to cut. And the other one goes up here to the overflow tank, which basically seems that is pressurized. So there's two hoses to this overflow tank, which indicates there is some water flow through there under normal operating circumstances, whatever. So interesting, but bottom line is we got it out. It didn't you know, there were lots of little issues along the way I've talked about, but overall it came out pretty easy once I got the heater hoses off, or the heater hose and the overflow hose, and we pulled it right out, which means I can put the new one right back in, and I can do it all without having to pull that radiator. So that's a good deal. We'll get this cleaned up and get started to put it back on. All right, so it's going back together a lot easier than it came apart, of course. We were able to get the water pump in, no problem. We used red Permatex gasket maker, high temp, on the back side of that. So it does come with a rubber seal, like a giant O-ring that's shaped to fit, and we still went ahead and used Permagasket as well, just to try to guarantee that we don't have any leaks, because we sure don't want to take this sucker off again. We put the water pump, slid it into position, and started getting bolts in it. Got all the bolts back in and everything. Then we put the main pulley back on the fan shaft or the water pump shaft. Of course, I dropped a bolt somewhere and can't find. I found 3 or 4, but I'm missing one, so hopefully I find that sooner or later. Anyway, then we threaded the fan clutch back on. I did put some anti-seize compound on those threads just for future. Be a long time before we have to put another water pump in this, but if I still got it, I definitely would like that to come off easier than it did this time. And we started reconnecting the water hoses. We put the thermostat back in here, and that connection, put the hose. I decided to reconnect all the old hoses, even though I bought new hoses for it. I'll just save them. Those hoses feel pretty good, actually. So yeah, reconnecting all the old stuff. So basically what I got left to do is all the hose clamps and everything. Still got a couple more hoses to attach. Once the hoses are all attached, the serpentine belt has to go back on. The coolant filter screws on down there, and refill it with coolant, and I think that's about it. Like I said, it went back together much easier than it came apart. So would I recommend doing this without taking off the radiator and everything? Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't that bad. I mean, the little problems that we had were just, you know, the bottom line, this is a 1999. That was the original water pump. So a lot of things were seized. You know, they just required a little extra effort to get them off. But that's going to happen regardless. If the radiator and everything was out of the way, would it have been easier? Probably. Just because sometimes, you know, we had to work without being able to see. So I couldn't see the front of everything. So sometimes you're just putting bolts in or taking them out pretty much by feel. But overall, yeah, I'd do it this way again, especially if you got air conditioning, because you don't want to have to drain your air conditioner to take all that out. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're going to continue getting this done.